Hi, this is Kara from the Special Needs Mom podcast.
And this is Angela from Especially Organized, Sensible Solutions for Special Needs Moms.
We have this heart for special needs moms. And so we thought, you know what, let's combine forces. And we have come up with what we're calling the Purge Party. And you can pretty much guess what it is. It's a party where we're going to come together and we're going to purge, or in general, accomplish a goal, a small goal together. So we have set this for January 27th, starting at 8 o'clock for my Pacific Coast people,
which means 11 o'clock for all of you on the East Coast. So this is an opportunity. If you have something on your to-do list that has just been stuck there and you are wanting to move it up on the list, you're wanting to tackle, maybe it's a space or an area of your home or a category in your home that has just needed a little time and attention. This is your opportunity for you to be online with us while you work and have access for us to help you answer your questions, help guide you, and just serve you for those 2 hours.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you can tell like what we've designed is just this very high level of support for that project that you just haven't been able to tackle on your own. The thing that we are envisioning is that you get to leave this purge party feeling so accomplished because you did the thing. You started the year off getting that thing done that you were stuck on last year. And so it's a momentum builder, if you will. You can go ahead and sign up. We have a link ready for you, and we are offering this for $40 for the whole experience.
Absolutely. And we hope you'll join us. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be a great group of moms of special needs kids. So we all get each other. We all have an understanding of what it's like to have something on our to-do list, but just we haven't been able to tackle it yet. So I hope that you will join us. We're super excited to bring this to you, and we are thrilled to work with you.
All right. We'll see you all there. Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. I'm so glad you're here. I know it's kind of weird, but I feel like I'm spending time with you when I press record, and actually even when I write my outlines. For me, the experience is just so connecting that I get to sit down and think of you, clearly not as one person, but as a community, knowing the conversations I get to have in the coaching communities and, of course, in social media, where I feel like I get to bring us together through these podcast episodes. And so thanks for hanging out with me. I would also love to know more about what you want to hear. Some of you know that I've been doing themes for the last couple months, kind of having a theme that overarches each month. And this month, I'm going to take a break for that. I was tossing around the idea of doing love in February, but I just couldn't get behind that for all 4 episodes. And I mean, I could probably have come up with something, but what I really like is I always have a running idea. I have a very long list of podcast episodes that I want to bring to y'all. But sometimes when I read through the list, there's one that stands out and hits me and just feels like, hey, I want to talk about this. So that's where this episode is coming from. As you might have read in the title, we're talking about when people think you're fine, but you're not. But before we get into the episode, I want to, special announcement. I want to announce something that's coming soon. I hinted towards it at the end of last year And I actually intended to have it start a little bit earlier, but I'm still getting things together. I always have so many more ideas than I have capacity to complete. But what is coming is what I'm calling activation sessions. And these are going to be coaching style episodes. And you guessed it. Yes, real moms like you get to come on the show, not live. So this is not a high stress experience. That sounds like torture. Here, I'll coach you and I'll do it in front of everybody. And you can't take anything back. No, I promise it will be something that doesn't feel too far out your comfort zone and feels caring and doesn't feel like torture. But the idea here is that we're going to go in super deep on one specific issue with one mom so that she can walk away with something to take forward, something for her to either do or something for her to practice or something for her to create in her life that has her moving towards where she wants. And the idea here is that likely you're going to have a high degree of connection and resonance with what she's experiencing so that you can actually have even more action points. And so I hope you will consider signing up for one of these episodes. I don't actually have a way for you to do that because I'm going to figure that out, but maybe by the time this episode goes live. So either there will be a link that will be obvious in the show notes, but if you are like, no, I want to sign up now, I want to be one of the first on the list, you will, one, get the most attention. So I highly suggest that. And you can just DM me, or you can also pull up my contact form on my website that's available again in the show notes and just let me know. I would love to hear from you. It always thrills me when I get to hear that an episode impacted you or that you've taken some action and you've had some major successes in your life based on you putting into implementation some of the awareness that you've gotten from the podcast or from individual conversations. Alrighty. Now let's move on to a story that I'm going to use to kick off this episode. And it's a story from many years ago, but still very, very relevant. So I'm going to take us all the way back to 2011 to when my son was 2 and when I essentially became a medical mom and when I became the mother of a boy who is disabled. Many of you might have an idea of our story, but many of you probably don't. We're going to go back to this time and I'm going to bring you a picture of where we were. Like I said, my son was 2 at the time of his diagnosis, 2 and 3 months to be precise. And he was diagnosed with brain tumor. And, we went from having a normal or typical child, and within 5 days, we had gone through a craniotomy and had a very, very different child. I will spare us the details of all the ups and downs of that hospitalization, but I don't know if complications is the right word, but complexities might be more accurate. And so because of the complexities of his surgery, he was in the hospital for 2 months. And most of that time was in what we would consider rehab. So he was on a floor that had a very low level of care. Good view though, which I appreciated. We were basically daily doing physical therapy, speech therapy, and occupational therapy. So essentially, we were living at the hospital like many of the moms here who have done long NICU stays definitely know. Although I will say it's a little different because having an infant in the child who you leave overnight is very different than having a 2-year-old or toddler in the hospital because we could not leave him. We had to have somebody there every waking hour because, again, the low level of nursing care meant that we couldn't just shut the door and walk away. So that was our life. And there was this moment where we were getting ready to go, getting towards the milestones that they wanted us to be at. We had a meeting where all the people that were part of his team, including myself, I don't think my husband was there. I don't remember him being there, but I could be wrong. This was a while ago now, right? So we had this meeting and we were essentially talking about what it looks like for Levi to go home. They were asking what kind of support we have, like if we have stairs, what needs to happen for him to be able to go home. So we talked through those logistics and came up with a plan, and they were connecting us to the people that would continue his therapies outside of the hospital. And I don't know who it was and what role they had, but I distinctly remember after that meeting when we were all kind of leaving the room and in the hallway, somebody turned to me or kind of was talking to me and they said, yeah, some moms feel really scared to go home after staying for so long. And I remember thinking, yeah, that's me. Yeah, I'm freaked out. I'm pregnant now. And I don't know what I'm going to do for my career and how I'm going to work with a child who is now very disabled. And yeah, I'm freaked out. However, I, for whatever reason, and actually I have some theories that I'll share, I didn't say anything. I just kind of smiled and nodded and thought, huh, that's interesting that she thinks that I'm doing so well. And this is not a knock on her. This probably has everything to do with my superhuman ability to be okay on the outside and to not be doing so well on the inside. And I will also add that this is also whatever we decided 11 or 12 years ago, where I was not the person I am now. And my ability to process emotions, my ability to connect with myself, none of it was there. I was a generally functional human, however, had not developed these skills. Actually, I feel like, if there's a spectrum of how people come into being a special needs parent in terms of having the coping skills and the emotional regulation skills and all of that, I would rate myself pretty low on that scale. So I had a lot of growth opportunity is how we can say that. So why didn't I say anything? I'm thinking back, and as I was processing and preparing for this episode, I was like, why didn't I say anything? And these are the three theories I have. And one, my guess is it just felt too vulnerable, that I already was so stinking fragile from like the duration of time in the hospital, the distress, all of these things. I guess I don't have to go into it. You all know how this feels. And so I think that I was like, I'm going to take a pass on exposing myself to this person, and I'm just going to smile and nod. I don't have the capacity to go there right now. Another reason I think I might have stopped there is I don't think I thought that she could help me. I think I thought, yeah, well, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, I'm not okay. So what? I still have to take my son home. So what are my options? This is, again, my much younger and less developed version of me. And I think another reason is like, I don't want to say anything or do anything to stop us from going home. So I will just figure it out. I will suck it up. I will do what's needed. Get me out of here is also probably what I was thinking. So this is the story that I want to use to lead into this conversation and to really normalize your experience if you highly relate to the experience of people thinking you're fine, but you not thinking you're fine. I'm not going to go into this episode of why we think we know this, but there's certain nuances of communication that maybe aren't verbal, but they leave us with interpretation of how somebody is thinking. I want to put in here that all of this is interpretation. None of it is factual. But for the sake of this conversation, we're going to just allow our interpretations and where we ended up or where we think we are. We're going to allow it to just be and not question it at this point. There certainly is an opportunity for that in a coaching conversation, but that's not this conversation. I want to go back to what I call the Pathway to Peace journey. And this is simply just 5 different stages that I see that just really give language and understanding to where we are. And I find it helpful so that we kind of have this guide map or this, it's not as clear as step-by-step instructions. Wouldn't that be great? But really, what do we see that we can take on or what's available to us to move forward? So I want to look at this real quick, and then I want to see how it overlays with this experience of when people think you are fine, but you are not. The first stage that we come to as a special needs mom is diagnosis. So in my case, this was when my child was 2. And many of you, this is when your child is born. Many of you, this is in the first couple of years of life when your child misses some milestones. And for some of you, this is prenatal. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter when this happened. We all have our, what I call our becoming story of when we had our world turned upside down. And so this phase might be very, very short for you, and it may not be. But the thing I want to point out about this phase is that there's usually a very sudden drop off in this phase of the level of support that people are outreaching for. So an example is in my case, I noticed a very significant shift when we went home from the hospital. So when we were in the hospital, I think everyone around us was like, oh, wow, one of their children is in the hospital. That's kind of a thing. But when we went home from the hospital, I think people didn't have a way to categorize that. And I think the default was like, oh, they must be okay now. And this is obviously grossly generalizing the experience. But for me, what I notice is a sudden drop off in people's reaching out for support, offering support, and even just general understanding that like things were not okay. So you might also experience this in terms of perhaps when you were first going through a diagnosis process and doing evaluations with your child, a lot of people were interested in supporting you. And once you got a diagnosis and once you kind of shifted from this first phase into the second and third phase, you notice people really weren't asking the same questions. They weren't checking in on you. It was just different. So as I mentioned, some of it might be a very sudden drop off and some of it might be a slow trickling away. So we then move into this second stage where I call this the self-sacrificing stability stage, where we are moving into the stage where like we kind of think we're okay. Like we're kind of stepping into this place of like, okay, I'm figuring this out. And really what's happening in this stage is you're regaining control. Like everything was taken away from you in stage one. And so you're grasping on and desperately trying to regain stability. However, it's through the means of control and usually fixing. There's this dual dynamic here where you are regaining control, but you also feel like you're not. You also have a distinct sense that like there's still nothing in your control. Yet it doesn't stop you from attempting to find this level of stability through changing your outside circumstances. Then this stage kind of leads you into the next stage, ultimately because it takes its toll on you. It takes a significant toll on you to soldier on and to really fixate on your child and kind of self-abandon. And so this starts to take its toll on you. You start to get really tired. You start to get resentful. You start to say, this is not the life I want. And so that's what launches you in to the rebellion is what I call it. This is my favorite name. So this phase is where you really recognize you're not okay. This is the phase where you're like, everyone thinks I'm okay. I look like I'm okay. I can acknowledge that I am operating as a human. However, I am not okay. And you know this because on the inside, you feel stuck, you feel trapped, you feel desperate for change, but you also are completely clueless on how that might be. So this is also when people are saying, wow, I don't know how you do it. Oh my gosh, you're such an amazing mom. Oh man, your kid is so lucky they have you. Can you tell we all hear these a lot, right? I bet you're laughing, but you're like, yep. So for them, this is them as in everybody outside of your immediate home. What the experience, I think, is they just stop asking because you enter into this new normal. So it doesn't occur to them that you still are very much not okay. And I think one of the core fears that comes out in this stage is you thinking that they're judging you or tired of you talking about it. That you're afraid that they're thinking, why are we still talking about this? Haven't we moved on? And again, this is one of those things where I think we interpret it from either people not asking or even people's change in interest when we are talking about it. It's all very subtle, but in speaking to mom after mom, I think this is a very common experience. So then in this stage is what happens is we really start to separate and feel separate, and the alone takes it to the next level. So with our old community, our family, our peers, we recognize in this stage that we're really never going to get back to where we were. And we don't like where we're going. Going back to last week's episode, the difference between restoration and recovery. So like we recognize we're not recovering, but we may not have tapped into restoration just yet. Okay, so that leaves us in this stage, in this rebellion stage where people think we're fine and we are not. And this is the part we want to focus on today, that I'm going to kind of go deeper in to, again, normalizing this experience, but then also looking at 3 specific aspects that will help us empower the recognition of where we are. 3 different angles to look at that I think are going to be really helpful. So here's number 1, to admit or accept how we are ourselves. So going back to the example I used of my own personal story, I don't think I was able to admit yet. I knew I wasn't okay, but I also wasn't okay with not being okay. I know that was complex. So I knew I wasn't okay, but I wasn't okay with not being okay. My only option was to put my face on, soldier ahead. Like the option did not feel open to me that I could take another route. And so this part of actually accepting, which is just letting something be without judgment, or even admitting, sometimes it's really hard to admit we're not okay. Whatever it is for you, just really being like, oh, like, and even saying it out loud to yourself or to somebody else, I'm not okay. Or, wow, to maybe a close friend or even spouse, like everyone seems to think I'm okay and I'm not okay. And so it feels even harder to share with people how I really am. So this first step can look like, I mentioned, just saying it either to yourself or another person. And also it might look like saying, I need help. So this could be to professional people. This could be to friends and family again. The other opportunity I think that we have in this aspect is also reflecting on our relationships with not being okay. When I was writing the outline, I laughed to myself. I was like, hello, childhood wounds, rearing your ugly faces as I'm trying to raise my child. You know, I think it's a very helpful experience to help us see the gaps that we ended up with as adults, right? We all have childhood wounds that we carry into adulthood. There's not a person, I don't think, on this earth that doesn't have something that they are working through from something that did or didn't happen when they were a child. So again, normalizing that, it's not a problem. And it takes sometimes some years to unpack that. Even this year, I'm doing a lot of work exploring these relationships or these agreements I've had that I never really questioned until I'm recognizing, oh, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about any given relationship. So in this first angle, this is the time where we can be curious. We can bring that acceptance and we can look at, honestly, how we are. Okay, on to angle number 2. Watch for making others wrong. Sometimes what can happen is we kind of latch on to any certain awareness, and then we go on a hunt. We go on a hunt to find people to prove ourselves right or to prove them wrong. And I just want to say, like, we will get what we look for. Have you ever had the experience when you are shopping for a car? Like, we recently bought a Toyota hybrid van, and we love it, by the way. When we first were kind of looking at it, thinking about the idea, we would start seeing them on the road. Oh man, there's one. And, prior to really kind of learning about these cars, like we didn't really ever notice them. Like we weren't able to distinguish that van from another van. I mean, maybe it looked a little newer, but like it wasn't something we were familiar with. But then all of a sudden, once we went shopping for one and we kind of got on the idea, we saw them and we just noticed them all the time. So I'm sure this has happened to you. It's maybe not a Toyota van, but maybe it's something else in your life that all of a sudden you learned about something and then you see it everywhere. Well, it's not because all of a sudden there was many more vans on the road. It's because I became aware of them. Like they became something that my brain was able to recognize. So it spotted it, it recognized it, it just knew where to put it. And so whether it's a van on the road or whether it's way somebody is speaking to you or the way that you interpret their words, this is the process. We really get what we look for. I want to put in that this is automatic and subconscious. We don't consciously think, oh, wow, this person thinks I'm okay, so now I'm going to go look everywhere to see if other people think I'm okay and but I'm really not. Like that doesn't happen. This is just an automatic thing that happens. Why? Why does our brain do this? Because our brain wants to be right. Its purpose is to keep us safe. And so it's gathering evidence to build a case to determine if it is accurate or not accurate, or in other words, right or wrong. And the more right it feels, the more secure it feels. And so if it can gather this evidence about how people think I'm okay, but I'm not, and they don't want to hear about it anymore, they're tired of me talking about it, you're going to start to believe that this is not okay for you not to be okay, or it's not safe for you to go there, because your brain's going to gather enough evidence to prove that true to you. And so I just want you to, again, to watch for this piece, because the last part of this little section is that instead of letting this be a fact that they think you're okay, but you're not, or that they don't want to hear about it anymore, your job is to turn towards yourself with kindness and curiosity, and to ask yourself some questions to kind of poke some holes in this theory that you have. You can ask yourself, is this absolutely true? Do I know this for a fact? What if it's not true that they think I'm okay? Or what if it's not true that they actually do want to hear about it, they just don't know how? What do you think you need? Is there something that you need to ask for? But these are curiosity-based questions, and you can notice, hopefully, the tone I use is coming from a kind place. It's not an accusatory place. It's not like, are you sure? Do you absolutely know it's true? No, it's like kind. It's like, are you sure? Okay, that's why I want you to notice the way you're being with yourself suggests either that you're judging yourself or that you're being kind and loving towards yourself. All right, the last point here, the last angle is finding a community who you believe gets you. I put believe in kind of air quotes when I was talking, but like I put asterisks by it, because they may or may not actually get you. But if you think they get you, then you are going to feel better about this. This happens to me all the time. I've had clients reach out being like, oh my gosh, I know you totally get it. So like you can help me. And I want to say, I mean, I am a good coach, but it's not true that I am the only person that can help them. I could list you dozens of good coaches that could help them. And so we don't want to pin ourselves in too small of a hole. So there's that angle. I want to put it out there that just because we think that we are exceptions doesn't mean we are. However, on the other side of that coin, sometimes it's just really easy to find those places that just feel safe easily. Okay, so that's where you get into your communities. Perhaps these are based around your child's conditions. My exception there, my exclusion for these is that many people talk about support groups and they have a very disempowering experience with them. One, because it just exposes you to all the things that can go wrong. And two, they're very child focused, right? It's like the purpose of them is to support your child. And so, yes, some of them have a ability to support you, but that's not the focus. And so you kind of get left behind again. And so I'd consider expanding your tool chest and finding maybe a general support group in terms of a place that you can get the support as an individual human in person. And I won't list all the ideas. There are so many different ways that you can get support. And of course, I have to mention the opportunity of Pathway to Peace. That is what this community is. It's not just a place where moms get it easily. It's a place where they're also committed to moving towards that next step in their lives. So like this next step that we move towards is called Calm the Chaos. And yes, it's chaos in your home, but mostly it's chaos in your hearts and minds. And that's where we get to go together. And the power of doing that in community, it really makes the work of coaching exponential. Okay, so that is the final piece I have for angle 3. And I want to put this in as we kind of wrap up, is that we have an opportunity to hold space for what I call this both and. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, we're just letting all of our experiences be our experiences. We can have all these feelings and these thoughts, and we can feel really stuck and alone. And we don't have to jump in and make it wrong and change it right away. Sometimes just allowing it to be and processing it before we try to change it is essential. And so learning how to process these things and to unravel them is such a vital part of you becoming a special needs mom who feels whole again, who feels empowered, who feels highly connected and supported. And so I just want to put this piece in here is that if you find yourself really resonating with feeling so not okay, and also like, oh gosh, everyone's tired of hearing this, that's okay. We don't have to make any big moves now. But then there's the both and. The and of this is, and if you want to, you can take some steps forward. Consider this my personal invitation to Pathway to Peace. I mean, I literally made this program for you to move from this rebellion stage in towards calming the chaos. I will leave you with that to think on. I'll look forward to seeing you in the next episode. One more thing before we officially wrap up this show. Sometimes when I'm listening to podcasts, I have the experience of wanting more. I'm listening at the very end thinking, I sure wish that episode didn't end. I invite you, if you feel in any way the same way, I invite you to the Special Needs Mom podcast community, which is a free group that I host on Facebook, where we as a community of fellow moms who listen to this podcast and are experiencing life in similar shoes, get to talk to one another, get to share stories, get to actually interact. I hope you'll consider joining. See you over there.